Good evening, everybody. Okay. Hello, my name is Wali Rahman. I'm an Organisational Development Officer at Wiltshire Council and also member of the #Epic Employee Engagement Group at Wiltshire Council. I'd like to welcome you all to the very first Epic Talks event, which will begin very shortly, and is titled The Impact and Influence of Social Media, and will be given by Dr. Charles Kriel. I would just now like to introduce Terence Herbert, Corporate Director for Children and Education, who will say a few words before we introduce the speaker. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wally. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's event. As Wally said, I'm Terence Herbert. I'm Corporate Director for Children and Education. Now, I get to do lots of quite dry and mundane things in my job for the local council, but this is genuinely really exciting and really interesting, so I'm glad to be here to present it. Thank you, Wally. And I'm very pleased to see lots of people here from the council, but also lots of people here from partner organisations and members of the public, which is really exciting for us here at Wiltshire. Now, through the Epic Talks, we hope to stimulate debate and learning, inviting thought leaders, academics, and some very inspirational speakers to share their knowledge on a range of topics. And fantastically, this is probably the most timely talk that we could ever get. I think one of the most frightening things I've heard recently is that it doesn't have to be true, it just has to be believed. Everything we're hearing about Cambridge Analytica, etc. So this is one of the most timely talks that we could have hoped for. The concerns, the current interest around the use of personal data, it's all quite, it's quite frightening. So hopefully at the end of this, I'll go home feeling less stressed and less anxious about the world. Dr. Kriel was recently appointed as the Specialist Advisor to the Digital, Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee on Fake News at the House of Commons. He's been advising on issues surrounding influence campaigning, personality profiling and micro-targeting social media audiences. Charles creates award-winning digital campaigns and works to support the civil society. He's the author of 5 books, a lifelong digital theorist and practitioner, a broadcaster and journalist, and he's worked in conflict zones and fragile states. Charles will soon be keynoting World Press Freedom Day in Parliament. He's recently given talks and addresses at conferences for the United Nations, the US State Department, MIT, which is famed for Media Lab, the world's seminal Digital Media Research Centre, Microsoft, the BBC, Royal Festival Hall, BAFTA, and many others internationally, and now he's at County Hall in Trowbridge. Charles is very active in the entertainment business and is just about to begin production on a documentary, which is also presenting. So without any further ado, please give a very warm welcome to Dr. Charles Kriel.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Terence, and thank you to Wally for the kind introduction, and thank you to all of you for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. And although it's quite frightening that I might speak for an entire hour, if I were in the audience, I would head for the door almost immediately. I have quite a lot of information to get through, and hopefully we can keep it lively and engaging. So 1 week ago tonight, several people gathered around the offices of Cambridge Analytica. There were several parties involved. There was a data auditing firm that had been sent in by Facebook to have a look at Cambridge Analytica's files, and Cambridge Analytica agreed to have them in and to have this look. There was also the ICO, representatives from the ICO were there, and of course, Cambridge Analytica themselves. And as this was going on, MP Damian Collins, who is the chair of the DCMS Select Committee, who have been investigating what's been happening with Cambridge Analytica, was speaking on the BBC and quite reasonably saying, what are they doing in there? Because it's unusual, isn't it? Why would Facebook be able to say, well, we're going to come in and audit your files? Why would Cambridge Analytica let Facebook, with whom they apparently had very little deal, let them come in and audit the files. What's an outside auditor doing? And shouldn't the ICO be the people who come into Cambridge Analytica when they're under investigation from so many organizations and have first crack at the data? This happened a week ago. Now we're in the situation that we're in right now. I'm sure all of you have been watching the news throughout the week and seeing what's been happening. I'm here to try to sort some of it out, to talk to you about fake news, to talk to you about data, and to talk to you about what a danger this is for our society. I'm not sure that I'll reassure you before the evening's over, but we'll see what we can do. Now, I arrived where I am now via art school. That's a very unusual path to come to this point. But art school is a pretty good path because fake news is all about storytelling. It's a form of propaganda. It's also a form of data storytelling and data design. And a lot of what I have done is create stories out of data. So I'm an Emmy-nominated game designer. I wrote the only definitive book, because it's a dictionary, otherwise it wouldn't be the definitive book, on free-to-play game design, and we will talk about that tonight. And I run a company called Kriel Agency, and through Kriel Agency, I serve as the program director for countering violent extremism at the Corsham Institute here in Wiltshire, and I also serve as a specialist advisor to the DCMS Select Committee. I run influence campaigns. I do a lot of storytelling. I work for the climate. Everything that I do, however, feeds into the civil society. I refuse to take on bad actors. I refuse to take on bad clients or clients that I consider to be bad anyway. So let's talk about fake news. To talk about fake news, we need to go at this subject from 2 or 3 different angles. Probably the best place to start is to talk about news in general. We know what news is, but what is news becoming? What is the future of news? This is the vital question as we look at the fake news paradigm. To my mind, fake news, or not fake news, but rather real news, the future of news, is the product of the newsroom. What is the product of the newsroom? It's a discrete package of information that can be used as a social token in the service of a community. Now that's pretty straightforward, but let's unpack it a little bit. So the discrete package of information. So the future of news is not a newspaper. It's not a news magazine. It's not an evening news program. Rather, it's what Barthes might call lexia. It's a little bundle of information, and that information can be passed around. It's used as a social token. I would use it as a social token. So there's a really interesting story about a poodle that rides a motorcycle with its owner, and they're riding the motorcycle across the country. And every little village that they go into, they get their picture in the newspaper. This is the old school discrete package of information. Now, it wouldn't work that way now. This would go viral on Instagram as a short video, and he could still tour the country. But I'm going to take that discrete package of information, and I personally am going to use it as a social token, and I'm going to pass it around my community in the better interest of my community. So what is the better interest of my community? Well, my community is a group of people who might, in this instance, find a short video of a poodle riding a motorcycle interesting. So it's a community of interest, and it's a community of humor. So I'm going to take this around, and I'm going to display my status to everybody, because I saw this before you saw it, and I think it's really funny. And don't you think I'm funny, because I think this is funny, and let's all laugh together. Okay, now let's take that and expand on that a little bit and talk about different kinds of communities. So another kind of community might be a community of white nationalists that are spread around the world. And these white nationalists gather discrete packages of information. We're not talking about whether the information is true or not. It's just information. And they bundle it, and they pass it amongst themselves as social tokens, displaying their status, displaying that they access this information first, showing you something that you don't know yet, but I have this information. And it is in service of the community because it makes me a little more white nationalist, and it makes you a little more white nationalist, and then we can all get together and we can be white nationalists together. And I've serviced my community in doing that. I haven't serviced them necessarily well in the interests of the civil society, but my community's not interested in the civil society. We're interested in white nationalism. We're interested in something else completely. And this is the future of news. It's the present of news as well. And in this kind of environment, what goes around most quickly, what becomes most viral, is that which is most sensational. So the person who wins at this game of the future of news is the person who can tell the most emotionally engaging story in the most viral and socially shareable way. And that way you win. It does not matter if you tell the truth. This is completely unimportant. It doesn't matter if what you're saying helps any other community than the community that you're trying to reach. If what you're trying to do is create discrete packages of information that are socially viable in service of your community, then you need to create the most sensationalist thing that you possibly can. And the reason that we're in this environment right now is because of social media. Social media is not just the passage of these bits of information, it's also the passage of information about family, information about what I had for breakfast, information about people I care about, or information about issues that I would like to be influential on. Often when I talk about social media to people, I'll describe different kinds of social media and try to explain what it is that they do well. If I'm consulting you to try to tell you how to do social media, one of the tropes I'd trot out is I'd say, look, you can only handle one medium at a time, so don't try to do Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. You can't do all of them. And if you're going to do just one medium at a time, then you need to pick the one that will work best for what you're trying to achieve or where you might be able to accomplish the most. So what's the difference between the different social media? Well, Facebook is for the heart, and Twitter is for the mind, and Pinterest is dreams of a better lifestyle. So Facebook is for the heart because it's where your family is. It's where your friends are. It's where the people that you care about are. And you want them to like you, and you want to like them, and you do very personal things in this space. Twitter is over-indexed for journalists and people who are trying to be influencers. And it's a really very good place to go and influence other influencers. And Pinterest, with its strong visual style, with its openness to brands, is the equivalent of a glossy consumer magazine. So you pick one of these, and these are the areas that you try and go operate in. But it's not just about the content that you're producing, it's also about who you happen to be targeting in that space. So data becomes a big part of what's going on in social media. And data is what we have been discussing intensely for the last several months on the Select Committee. This data is your data. And your data exists in the space of these social media platforms, but it also exists within the contexts of the cultures that you happen to live in. So right now I'm working on an article for the NATO Center of Excellence in Riga, which in fact a lot of this talk was drawn from a paper that I had written earlier. And right now I'm writing about the difference between the approach to data rights, because you do have rights to your data. This is what GDPR is about. It's what the Data Protection Act is about, your rights to your data. Rights to data are approached very differently depending on the superstate that you happen to be in. So if you're in China, right now there's a really interesting thing going on in China called social credit score. You may or may not have heard about it. But it's a bit like Black Mirror meets The Man in the High Castle. All of your social media platforms are working together and sharing data with the Chinese Communist Party, who are using this in order to assign you a score which is ostensibly a credit score, but in fact it's both a credit score and an indicator of how much you support the CCP and how much your actions will help to keep them in power. So they're using, and it's dire, and we won't go into detail about it tonight because we could speak about it for hours. But the Chinese approach to this is data as a means of population control. The United States approach to your data rights is one of consumer rights. You as a consumer have certain rights and you can sell your data, and you do sell your data because you sign it away when you sign the end user license agreement, which you didn't read when you signed up for the platform that you happen to be on, but you are trading it for something. But the European approach is that data rights are human rights. Now, this is in general a pretty low data rights space, social media, but it's about to change, and GDPR is going to change things. So there is a little bit of hope out there, and that hope is coming through regulation. Why is this such a big deal? Why, I mean, really, why does it matter so much about what's going on with your data and your behavior in social media platforms? It matters because a lot of us in this room are addicted. I'm addicted. I don't know which platforms y'all are addicted to. I'm pretty addicted to Facebook, although I'm starting to get away from that. I'm replacing it a bit with an addiction to Twitter. What I'm not replacing it with is mindfulness or meditation or being present or reading more novels, which is what I would really like to be doing. But I am addicted to these platforms. And when I'm in these platforms, in these states of addiction, I'm making decisions about the information that I'm encountering. And that's okay. It's good that we all make decisions about the information we encounter. The trouble is that I'm making these decisions on the basis of how I feel, not on the basis of what is rational. So we come into the field of behavioral economics. People are not rational beings. They do not make decisions based on solid logic. They make their decisions off the basis of who's shown me this, or how was I feeling this morning, or how did I get primed before I walked into this situation. And then they make a decision, and then they tell themselves that they've been incredibly rational. Now, the reason this has become a part of my personal study is because of my work in the past as a free-to-play game designer. So free-to-play games are Candy Crush Saga, something like that. Is anyone addicted to any free-to-play game, or have you ever been addicted in your life? I'm going to raise my hand to that, right? Okay, we've got a few hands here. That's great. The core gamer when I was a kid used to be a 13-year-old kid. It was a 13-year-old boy. The core gamer now is a woman in her mid-40s, and she has a credit card. Which changes the whole game, and everything is very, very different. Now, the games industry found itself in a really interesting situation once apps came along, once smartphones came along, because Apple pegged the price of apps at free. They should be free. Lots of free apps. So people will spend £1,000 on the most beautiful smartphone you could possibly get. It's glorious. I'll have two. Great. But if you ask them to pay 99 pence for an app, they won't do it. They're like, are you kidding? That's outrageous. So games designers found themselves in a situation where they had to somehow convince people to give them money in a game that was free, that could be played all the way through to the end for free, but you're so into it that you're willing to still spend money. And we're going to come back to that in a moment. But this is also how social media platforms work, and a lot of other kinds of platforms too. And it's why we're addicted. It's not by accident, it's very, very much by design. This is how Facebook works. And we're going to come back to this slide in a little bit, and I'm going to talk to you about it in detail. But this kind of loop, and I would call this a compulsion loop from a design perspective. And I had to learn all of this stuff, by the way, because I lost a lot of money making games, just to be clear. I made a lot of my own games, and I put them out, and I went, I'll charge $4.99, and they would sink straight to the bottom of the App Store. So then you'd have to give them away free to get people to download them, then I ended up in that very same situation. So this is used by companies who are either targeting people with advertising to try to get them to stay on their platform, or people who are trying to sell you in-game virtual merchandise or coins or magic hats or whatever it might be, and we'll talk about that too. Or people who want to do something that's much more insidious, and that much more insidious thing might be trying to get you to vote in a particular way, or trying to get you to not vote in a particular way. Perhaps I'd like to get you to vote for Donald Trump. Or maybe what I would like to get you to do is not go out and vote for Hillary Clinton. Either of these are a win. And this kind of behavior design is used to get people to do what we would like them to do. Now, why does it work so well? It's because you're playing chess. And you're playing chess with artificial intelligence. When you open Facebook, Facebook shows you its first move. And its first move is that first piece of content that you see. And you can't think of this as the wall as a long strip of paper that's already formed and you're scrolling through it. Because any piece of content that you can't see, it hasn't decided you're seeing it yet. It's waiting to see what you do when you make a move. Do you dwell on this? Do you click on it? Do you like it? Do you go on to the next thing? And then it makes its move by showing you the very next thing. Has anybody here ever been on Tinder? I've been on Tinder. When you're on Tinder, always the first 3 or 4 people are really hot. And it makes you want to stay. It makes you really want to have a good look. And then later on, you start seeing people who might be a little less appropriate, or you might think are a little less appropriate for you. And that's because the AI makes its first move. It tries to keep you in the platform, tries to keep you on the platform as long as it possibly can. It waits for you to make its move, because these are advertising mediums. And in an advertising medium, every moment that you stay on that platform is literally money in their pocket. So you play chess with the AI. What happens when you play chess with a computer? You lose. And this is the situation that we're in with the social media platforms. This is one of the guys we're losing to. His name is Robert Mercer. Robert Mercer is a ultra right-wing American conservative billionaire activist. Mercer was one of the original programmers of Watson at IBM and natural language processing. Mercer went on to found Renaissance Technologies, where they began trading money things. I don't really understand money, so I can't really talk about that. Money things, banking things, until they controlled a substantial amount of the world economy and are trading a substantial amount of the world economy. And Mercer and his daughter Rebecca are very activist in far right-wing American politics. But you also might have heard his name come up in the last week, because Robert Mercer owns most of Cambridge Analytica. And Steve Bannon, who was recently in the White House, we know, and was also the publisher of Breitbart News, which Robert Mercer also owns, by the way, also was the board vice president of Cambridge Analytica. So a lot of the news that we're seeing, a lot of the fake news that we're seeing, a lot of what we're hearing about Cambridge Analytica this week, although it is a story about Cambridge Analytica and it's a story about their CEO, Alexander Nix, it's also a story about Steve Bannon and about Robert Mercer. Now, there might be some people here whose politics is far to the right, but I promise you, you're nowhere close to the American far-right politics. Nowhere. Interesting paradigm with what's happening with American politics. Why is everybody so freaked out about Cambridge Analytica? What is it that Cambridge Analytica is actually doing? So we see the freak out, we see that people are worried about their data, but it's a really hard story to understand. And if you watched Andrew Marr this Sunday, you'll have seen Carol Cadwalader from The Guardian in an interview where she kind of got mowed down a little bit, both by Marr and by a journalist whose name I'm really sorry I can't remember, who just didn't agree with her. And I was watching it, and I have met Carol, and she's a very intelligent woman. She's worked this story for a long time, but this is just a story that's not easy to tell in a sentence. It's really hard to compress it down to a soundbite, and I think that she struggled to communicate what Cambridge Analytica do. So I'm going to try to tell you in 3 slides and see how we do. So Cambridge Analytica run influence campaigns. Now, an influence campaign can be anything. It could be, I'm trying to sell you soap, or I'm trying to make you have a better feeling about the brand that is Dove. That's an influence campaign. They're incredibly hard to measure. They're really hard to do. They operate in a big way in social media now. But there are other forms of influence campaigning as well. One form of influence campaigning might be, for example, trying to convince Latvians that Russia is standing on their doorstep and about to overrun the country, which is not that far off the truth. But this is the kind of work, this is the kind of influence campaign that SCL has done, and SCL is the parent company of Cambridge Analytica. SCL owns 10% of Cambridge Analytica. Last time I looked, SCL owned 10%. Robert Mercer owned about 90%. Cambridge Analytica works specifically in elections, and they work in elections around the world. They've been working in elections in developing countries, in post-Soviet countries, in African countries, and recently they worked in the US election, where they claim to have been very responsible for Donald Trump becoming president, and they believe that their operation made that happen. A lot of other people do too. It's a mixed bag right now. It's up in the air. There are different reports. They function off the basis of behavioral science, data analytics, and addressable ad technology. These are the 3 core technologies. Now, behavioral science that's wrapped around a kind of typology, personality profiling. So what they try to do is they'll gather lots and lots of data points about people who are on social media, Facebook, for example, and with those data points, they will try to nail down your personality. And in nailing down your personality, it's not just, oh yeah, he's a nice guy, keep him away from the bar, he's a little bit conservative. It's not like that. It's like, what is this person afraid of? What's really going to get them to stay home? Or what's going to get them to go out and vote for something? And they do this with a 5-factor system called OCEAN, which stands for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And the example that I have is someone who's highly neurotic and conscientious will tend toward an emotion of fear. So the conscientiousness has to do about how you feel about your community, how you reflect yourself within your community, how much you're concerned about that, and the neuroticism is about very much wanting to do the right thing. You combine these two, and often fear is a really good driver there. So they're running these behavioral science routines based on OCEAN, and then data analytics based on the data that they're gathering about people, both from Facebook, and Alexander next would stand here and tell you that they have not been gathering data from Facebook and that they don't possess any data from Facebook. Just to be clear. Carol Cadwalader would stand here and tell you that absolutely they do. Alexander Kogan would tell you that absolutely they do because he sold them data. So this is a contentious piece of information, but I'll present it as though it is true. What's not contentious is that if on the basis of 10 data points, 10 likes that you've liked, I can probably predict your behavior better than one of your coworkers. And off the basis of 300 likes, I can probably predict your behavior better than your husband or your wife or your life partner. So they claim to have 5,000 data points on 220 million Americans. That is every American who can vote, every adult American. And with this, they work the campaign. And then there's addressable ad technology. And what addressable ad technology lets me do is it lets me target an ad at you. I can send one to you. Pretty sure I can send it to you, and I'm pretty sure you might not see it. And this is a very new thing, because we used to have a public square. We used to drop flyers to spread our propaganda. We used to go and shout in the streets about what it is that we believed, either crazed or inspired, whichever you might think. But now I can shout in your ear and nobody else can hear me. And if nobody else can hear me, that means none of the regulators can hear me. None of the security services can hear me. Nobody knows whether I'm following electoral law or not. And this gets to be a pretty complex space. And it's especially a complex space when you're talking about someone like Facebook, who have consistently lobbied to not be regulated in any way whatsoever. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that in this country, if you pass around a flyer around an election, you must print on that flyer how this has been funded, where it's come from. Is that, what's the specific language? Sorry. Who is promoted by, published by, and printed by. You don't have to do this with a Facebook ad. And, or at least in the United States elections, you don't have to do this with a Facebook ad. And they argued that it would be too small and too irrelevant, and it stands in the way of innovation. And so because Americans don't have the political will in order to regulate them, they've gone unregulated. I think this is unlikely to be the case for very long. There's a lot of conversation out there about that. I even read today conversation about breaking up Google on the basis of antitrust law. There are conversations about turning Facebook into a utility. So it's really fascinating times, and it's a really extraordinary opportunity right now for Europe and the UK to get this right and the way that data works. Why is it so important to get it right? Because we're so terribly, terribly addicted to social media platforms. Let me explain to you very briefly just how it is that Facebook works. I'm walking down the street and something triggers me. Maybe my trigger is I feel a little bit lonely. And so I pull my smartphone out of my pocket and I open up Facebook. I take an action off the basis of that trigger. And from that action, I get a reward. Oh, look, someone's posted an interesting piece of content. That's terrific. And so I then make an investment. My investment is I'm going to make a pithy comment to go along with that interesting piece of content that I've just seen on Facebook. And that investment contains the seed of the next trigger. Because I put my phone back in my pocket and I walk 10 steps, and I get my phone back out again because I want to see if anybody liked it or if anybody had another pithy comment, and thus I go around and around and around in what's called a compulsion loop. But this isn't really addictive right now. It's not addictive because it's pretty consistent. It just operates consistently. So we've got trigger, action, reward, and investment. However, if you change the reward to an intermittent variable reward, suddenly we have addiction. We have compulsion. We have what the industry politely calls engagement. Intermittent variable reward works by means of, one, I don't know what I'm going to get, because that reward that I'm getting could be almost anything. It could be negative. I'm seeing someone commenting badly on the comment that I made, and then, ooh, that winds me up. Or it could be mediocre. It could be a couple of people have liked it. Or it could be splendid. It could be, someone has friend requested me and they're really hot. It could be across that entire range. The other thing is, it's intermittent, so I don't know when I'm going to get this variable reward. I might have to wait 10 minutes before someone comments on something. I might have to wait till tomorrow, or it might not happen at all. And this broad variety makes it phenomenally addictive. So there's a quite famous story in behavioral economics of a exercise that was done with dolphins, feeding them fish. And at the same place, at the same time every day, a dolphin trainer went to the side of the pool and fed the dolphin one fish. The dolphin learned that that's when the fish would come. And after a while, it kind of traipsed off. It would come every day, but then maybe not so much because maybe it didn't need the fish today. So then they changed it up. They changed it up so that every day, same time, one fish, except on the 5th day, the dolphin gets a bucket of fish. Great. That's amazing. So what does the dolphin do after a little while? Comes around every 5th day. Because why would you come for the little fish? Just come for the big fish. So then they changed the exercise where that same time, every day, the dolphin gets anything from no fish all the way through to a bucket of fish and anything in between. And the dolphin comes every day. Every day the dolphin's there. Because the dolphin doesn't know what it's going to get, but when it gets it, it is going to be awesome. And I often say it's kind of like dating a married person. Because when you're there and when you're with them, they just think you're the most wonderful thing in the universe because you're the opposite of everything that they're trying to escape and everything else that they want, and they adore you, and it's fantastic, and it's great. But when you send them a text message, they're never going to text you back. It's just, they're not going to answer the phone. It's just not going to happen. You don't know what you're going to get. You don't know when you're going to get it, but when you get it, it's going to be incredible. And this is the basis of intermittent variable reward, and it's one of the fundamentals of the way that social media works and also the way that game design works. So where did I learn all of this? I learned this from slot machines. Slot machine design forms the basis of social media design. Everything that was developed, mostly in Australia, but certainly in Vegas as well, so from pokies in Australia to multi-line penny slots in America, which are the most popular and the most profitable. From here come the basic tropes that go into Facebook, and this is why you won't go home and feel very good at the end of the night, because we'll talk about some of the detail now of how that works. So the first thing we say when we're inside of a game, we're selling two different things. We're selling people status, and we're selling people time. If I'm selling you status, I'm selling you a purple magic hat that doesn't do anything, but it's really special, and it's really hard to come by, okay? Now, if there's not a lot of other players in the game, and I sell you a purple magic hat, it's useless. But if I sell you a purple magic hat, and you can show everybody else that you have one, you're displaying status. So I sell you a piece of status, and you display it, and you feel better about yourself. If I'm selling you time, the way that works is, let's say level 13 is really easy, and level 14 is kind of easy, but level 15 it's really difficult. And it takes a long time to get through level 15. But it's okay, you get through level 15, and then you come to level 16, and it starts to look like it's going to be like level 15, and you just go, oh, you know what, I'll buy the coins and buy my way through. I'll just buy my way through this level. And so I've sold you time. And these are the two things that we sell to people. Now, one of the mechanisms that we use in selling these things is we concern ourselves with mental transaction cost. Now, mental transaction cost is one of the reasons that free works so incredibly well. So if I want to sell you something if I want to sell you A for £2, but I want to sell you B for £1, then you need to stop and think about what is the value of A and what is the value of B, and how does that compare to £2 and £1. And the cost here is not the actual money. The cost is the amount of mental energy you're having to spend on trying to figure out what this is worth. And so it drains your mental resources. However, if I have A is £1 and B is free, well, it's fine, I'll take the free one, because I don't have to calculate the cost. And so there's no effort in doing this. And so you go straight for the thing that is free to you. You go straight in and straight for it. It's one of the powers of social media, because it all seems to be free. We deal with denomination of play. And denomination of play in a game is all around exchange rate. We're back on money here again and how that works. And this is not just about money. It's about your time. And it's about how much energy you're putting into a thing and how much reward is coming back to you. So an equivalent to this is a comparison between reading a novel and playing on Facebook, and I'll come back to that metaphor in a moment. So denomination of play means I need to confuse you about how much your money is worth within this game. So often when you're playing these free-to-play games, what you have is you have high-value coins, where you have about 100 of them, and then you have like low-value stars, where you've got about 20,000 of them. And what you can do is you can go in and you can buy these stars for like 10 quid, and you can buy these coins for 10 quid, but you're not quite sure what the difference is, and there's gradations as you go up, but there's packages of both coins and stars, and it's kind of hard to make sense of how that works, but it works. But then I give you free things too, and every once in a while I run a discount, and what it means is you have no idea what a pound is worth within the game. You never know what the exchange rate is. And if you never know what the exchange rate is, then you never stop and think, well, I could have a Snickers bar. And then you just don't buy the magic coins or the magic stars. And the same thing happens when we're in social media, because it's a constant play with reward. It's a constant play of the energy that you have to put into it and what you get back from that within social media. And I can burn an hour like that in social media, and I didn't even intend to. I sat down to have a cup of coffee, and it's just gone. But in an hour, I could have read 20% of the novel that I really want to get through. And I'll tell you, tomorrow morning I'll sit down with the social media again and not sit down with the novel that I really want to go through, because it's addictive, because we don't understand the denomination of play and what's working in there. The other thing that's really interesting in the social media space, and it's particularly interesting right this moment, because it's called day one retention. It's the most important metric in the way that games and platforms work. Right now, there's a lot of conversation out there about delete Facebook. Let's delete Facebook. Let's get off Facebook, which is really hard because Facebook is about the heart. It's where my family are. It's where my friends are. But I need to find something else that I can do in that, something to substitute for that. And it's hard to find that thing. But if I could find another platform, and one of the other platforms that's out there is called Vero. It's Vero, which I've downloaded at the advice of the man who founded Corsham Institute, who's a great citizen of Wiltshire. But I download it and I open it up and I have a look at it, and there's not a party going on. There's just not a party. There's just not a lot of people there. There's nothing happening. And so I close it and don't open it again. And about 5 days later, I'm like, what's that? And I delete it. So they failed at day one retention. They didn't show me the action right away. And so I deleted the app. And if your app is not on my phone, then I'm not spending money in your app, or I'm not spending time in your app, which earns you money. So this becomes one of the most important things. Now, I'll just talk a little bit about gambling, because it's very relevant to what's going on in social media. In gambling, we have a term, and I say we, I have never made gambling games. I've only made free-to-play games, which is a completely different field. But there is a term called continuous gaming productivity. Continuous gaming productivity is essentially, I want to get you on a machine, I want to get you pulling the lever or punching the buttons, and I want to keep you doing it for as long as I possibly can. I don't want you to do it slowly. I want you to do it quickly. I want you to carry on doing it. One of the ways that I get you to carry on doing it is by using coin multipliers, so that you can bet not one way, but 2 or 3 ways, or with the bigger machines, you can bet as many as 100 ways in a single moment. And you have no way of being able to tell what the odds are, because there's virtual real mapping that's happening in there. So you don't really know what the odds on any number are. The odds are far less that you'll go on this fruit than you'll land on that fruit. And then what I do is I make sure that you win every time. Because there's 100 different ways you could have won. So you can bet 100 different ways because it's penny slots. And so I make sure that you win in 5 ways. And it's great because the lights happen and it's beautiful and bing bing and it's lovely but it's just you. You just plugged into the machine and it's great. And you don't even notice that you lost 20 different ways, even though you won 5 different ways. And so these are losses disguised as wins. And it's not that far off of me sitting at my breakfast table on Facebook playing chess with the artificial intelligence instead of reading the novel that I would really like to read. I get near misses. I think I might have won if I just spent a little more time. There might have been an interesting piece of content if I just scroll back to the top and reload and start all over again and go all the way down through it. And then what I do is I play to extinction. Now, playing to extinction in Vegas means getting you on a machine and getting you to play until you're out of money, or you're at least out of all the money that you can possibly spend in this session. Playing to extinction in social media is getting you on and getting you to spend as much time there as you possibly can, to spend as much time on device as you possibly can so that I can make the most money that I possibly can until you just don't have time to play anymore. Now, is this bad? Because there's an interesting question to ask here, whether this is bad or not. So there's a lot of people who would say social media is really good for you. It makes you feel good. There's a lot of folks who would say, what's wrong with playing Candy Crush Saga? You know, and if you want to spend 25 pounds a month playing Candy Crush Saga, and if it makes you happy, why not play Candy Crush Saga? It's okay. And in fact, if you want to gamble and you can afford it and you don't spend your kids' education, why not do that too? There's a really good argument for this. And the argument would probably be based on the work of a professor from the University of Chicago Department of Psychology called Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And he's written a book called Flow, and I would recommend it absolutely to everyone. I think Flow is probably the birthing document of the mindfulness movement, at least in America. Mindfulness, meditation, and so on. Alan Watts would be the birthing document of meditation, but at least in our contemporary cycle that we're going through. And what Csikszentmihalyi is saying is that happiness is not ha-ha. It's not getting tickled. It's not being delighted. Happiness is being engaged. Happiness is being in the flow of a thing. Now, I get this flow of this thing when I'm writing. I get this flow when I'm making music. And I can sit down at a table, sit down with my laptop, and work all day, and 5 hours later I'm still there, and the sun has gone down, and the dog really needs a walk, and I'm hungry, but then I work for a couple more hours anyway, because I'm in a flow. That's the beautiful side of it. The not beautiful side of flow is best manifested by saying that gamblers, in their heart of hearts, addictive gamblers actually don't want to win. They want to lose. You're playing, doing the multi-line, lots of lights, lots of nice little sounds. It's really terrific. And then you hit the jackpot. It's the jackpot. The siren goes off. The lights are big. People come over. There's money pouring out of the machine. Everyone's getting a bucket. They got the big check. They take you to the side. They take your photograph. And in the middle of it, you remember that you really hate your husband. And when I was back there in the flow, just pumping things into this machine, I couldn't remember that. And so it was an escape mechanism for me. It was a place for me to go away. It was a place for me to deal with the difficulty that is the living of this life that we all have to deal with. Now, one of the powerful tools that we've found to deal with the difficulty of living this life as individuals is social media, because we go there and we connect with one another and so on. But we go there and connect with one another through the medium of a big international corporation. You have a public square. Somebody figured out how to move into the public square and stand between you all and make money from doing that. That's part of what's happened in social media. On the other hand, in social media, we can organize things and we can make good things happen. But it's really important that we all as individuals understand what it is that we're doing in social media, how it's impacting us, what it's doing to our psychology and our emotions, and how it is we can make good judgments about what's happening within this space. Because one of the things that happens within this space, and it's one of the most insidious things that happens to us, is fake news. Because it is the engine that is the driver of social media. Our data is taken, we're specifically targeted, we're delivered information that pits us against one another. Whether it's Russians, whether it's someone who doesn't want you to get out to vote, whether it's someone who wants to take advantage of Black Lives Matter in order to pit people against one another, we are pitting ourselves against one another in this social media space. Fake news is made up of a combination of disinformation, targeting that's based around data, a complete lack of understanding of the addictive qualities of social media. We know we're addicted, and yet we do it nonetheless. The World Economic Forum has said that computational propaganda is one of the top 10 threats to society. And indeed it is. So all across the world right now, we're seeing this, and from Singapore through to America. I've had the privilege of witnessing the investigatory committees there and to advise an investigatory committee here to see how much people really care about this issue and that it can be solved and that a solution is out there. It just demands that everybody come together, work in an incredibly bipartisan way, because what is at stake for all of us is the civil society itself. Thank you.